Persuasive Selling and Power Negotiation. Continued. Disc 10.
You're listening to Communication Skills to Influence and Persuade. There's a myth that many people believe, and that is that communication is simply the words we say. When somebody says, "I'm going to communicate," they think they're talking. And yes, talking has something to do with your communication, but it's a myth to believe that communication is simply the words we say. In this audio program, we're going to talk about communication skills to influence and persuade people. I make my living as a professional speaker. I communicate when I go out and speak, but I also write. And when I write, I'm also communicating. And when I live my life, I'm communicating. And when I'm listening, I'm communicating. See, as I travel around the country and I speak to all sorts of different groups, I've spoken to little local groups, little organizations, smaller nonprofits, all the way up to things like General Electric, Cisco Systems, and the Harvard Business School. When I go out and I communicate, my goal is to influence and persuade people, specifically as it relates to being successful. The name of my company is Made for Success. You would think that that's what I would want to do. So as I've gone out and I've become this professional speaker that travels around, I've had to ask myself, what is it that enables me to influence and persuade other people? And I've made it my life study to find out what enables other people to influence and to persuade people. When you think about the definition of influence, it simply means to help other people change their thoughts, beliefs, and actions. That's what persuasion is, changing thoughts, beliefs, and actions. So I want to give you an overview of influence and persuasion before we get into the exact communication skills to influence and persuade. One of the first things we need to understand about influence and persuasion is that it's not something that we necessarily do, like we can decide, I'm going to go influence other people. You see, other people decide whether or not you will influence them or not. The influence decision, the persuasion decision, is made by the person who's being influenced or persuaded, not by the person who wants to do the influence or the persuasion. It's made by the person who's being influenced or persuaded. See, if I say, I want to go influence this person, and they say, you know what, I don't believe you, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm not going to be able to influence them. The decision about whether or not it takes place is made by the other person. That's important for us to understand, because then it refocuses us as the communicator, as the influencer, as the persuader, to not thinking it's just something that I go do to other people, but instead of being persuasion technique oriented, it becomes personal transformation oriented on the behalf of the influencer and the persuader. I believe that one of the best things you can do if you want to master communication skills to influence and persuade other people, if you want to be a person who, when you speak, other people listen, or when you write or when you are involved in a group, other people will listen and you will have influence and persuasion in that group, You need to master a couple of things. The first is your character, and the second is your skills. You see, you communicate in many ways all the time. Communication isn't just what you say, it's how you live. That's why it's important for us to think about this in two particular areas, character and skills. The first, character, things like your attitude and your integrity. See, people are making decisions about whether or not you're going to influence or persuade them based on your integrity and your attitude. Think about it. If you're a salesperson, let's say you sell cars, and somebody comes into your car dealership and you are paired up with them and you're showing them around, you're showing them different cars. If they don't believe in your integrity, if they don't like your attitude, they're going to go somewhere else. You're not going to be able to influence or persuade them in their car purchase. So your character has a big part to play as it relates to your ability to sell cars. And it's not just, they don't just know you. I mean, they don't walk on a car lot and say, okay, I've known you for 3 minutes now. And they might not know the depth of your character, but we give off these kinds of things as people meet us. They make decisions about us even after 3, 4, 5 minutes on what our character is. If we talk about pulling the wool over somebody's eyes or something like that, I would highly recommend that you not talk about those kinds of things in front of somebody you're trying to sell a car to, because they make decisions about your integrity. And if you're, kind of bad-mouthing the day and, the day isn't very good and nobody's buying, and you don't want to say that in front of somebody who's come onto your car lot to buy a car, because they're judging your character. People that you want to influence and persuade are looking at your character, and they're saying, what kind of person is this? Is this the person that I should trust? Is this a person I should listen to? Because ultimately the leader-follower relationship, and that's truly what influence and persuasion is based on trust. Does the person trust you? If you want to influence somebody, you're going to have their trust. If you want to persuade somebody, you're going to have their trust. So when you're thinking about communication skills to influence and persuade, one of the first things you should think about before you ever get into any sort of persuasion techniques is to think about this idea of what it means to have character. So you're giving yourself the platform upon which people will want to be influenced by you. Now, the second thing is your skills. You have to have good communication skills. You're also going to want to have skills as it relates to your chosen profession. Again, let's go back to a car salesperson. You're going to want to know everything there is about the cars. You're going to want to know the different models. You're going to want to know the basic prices. You're going to want to have high skills as it relates to automobiles and as it relates to the sales process. You want to give off this air of sophistication as it relates to your ability to carry out the functions of your job. People want to be able to trust you. Again, your character builds trust, but your skills also build trust, and trust is sort of the oil of the machine of influence and persuasion. So as you work on your character and you work on your skills, you're going to build this trust. Now, you also want to work on your skills of communication. That's what this whole audio program is about, is how to learn the skills of communication. You're going to want to be able to speak well. You're going to want to enunciate. You're going to want to have good diction. You're going to want to be able to have a broad vocabulary. Those are the kinds of things that are going to help other people view you as a good communicator. And when we communicate well, when we use our language well, other people are more apt to be influenced and persuaded by us. Thomas Jefferson said something interesting many, many years ago. He said in a letter that he wrote to John Adams that there is a natural aristocracy among men, the grounds of which is virtue and talent. And I love that quote because it lines up with this idea of character and skills. See, Jefferson said that there's a natural aristocracy. That means that the people who rise to the top, the cream of the crop, the creme de la creme, those are the people who have virtue and talent. The grounds of the natural aristocracy and rising to it is virtue and talent, character and skills. So you have to have both. If you want to be an influencer and you want to be a persuader, if you want to be a person who can communicate effectively, the grounds of coming to natural aristocracy in those areas, the foundation is what I talked about moments ago, and that is your character and your skills. And that's something that has been born true from generation to generation by high achievers, starting with Jefferson, the natural aristocracy among men, the grounds of which is virtue and talent. People who master influence are people who win in life. The people who rise to the high levels are people who've understood that it's all about influence. I really believe that the whole grounds of success in life, your ability to live life in a successful way, is based on the ability to influence and persuade. If you think about it, when you start out and you're just a little kid and you want food, you have to convince mom to get up and cook food. You got to get dad off the couch to go get you a little bit of food so you can eat and survive. When you're 7, 8, 9 years old and you want a bike, you're learning communication skills to influence and persuade. When you're a baby and you want food, you've got very raw communication skills. You want something to happen when you're 8 months old. What do? You go, wah! That's your basic level of communication skills to influence and persuade. Then you begin to hone those when you're 7, 8, 9 years old and you decide you want a bike for Christmas. Well, you're mastering the influence and you're mastering the communication skills. And if you're like one of my 4 kids and you're that age, when they were that age, they had certain skills and it went sort of like this. Can I have a bike? Can I have a bike? Dad, can I have a bike? I want a bike. Can I get a bike? Will you buy me a bike? It's over and over and over. But they're honing their skills. It's not just screaming and crying anymore. They're beginning to master those skills. Then as you get a little bit older and you get to be in high school, and I'll say it from the perspective of a male, you have that good-looking girl that you want to take to the prom. You got to learn communication skills to influence and persuade. So you learn how to be suave and sophisticated, and you ask that girl to the prom, and a lot of it might have to do with how you ask. You don't just go up and say, "Hey, bub, you want to go to a dance with me?" That wouldn't fly very well. You got to learn how to communicate in such a way that the girl will actually want to go to the dance with you. Well, then eventually you evolve and you graduate from college, let's say, and you go out and you're trying to get your first job. You need to master communication skills to influence and persuade that boss to give you that job out of college. And as you go out and you develop your career, and let's say you're in sales, then you have to master communication skills to influence and persuade other people to purchase your product. You have to master communication skills to influence and persuade the banker to give you the loan for your mortgage so you can buy your first house. On and on and on, the success of our lives depends on the ability to master communication skills to influence and persuade other people. And the primary way that we influence and persuade other people is first and foremost to establish that foundation of character and skills, but then the next way is for people to hear when we speak. It's so important to learn to speak well, not to slur your words, not to use a lot of slang, not to do anything that would cause other people who are listening to you to say, "Well, I don't trust him," or "I don't believe him," or "I don't like him." That's even worse. You want to be believable, you want to be trusted, you want to be liked. Those are important things. And as you're improving your communication skills, it's important for us to do that, to understand that speaking is a very important, and it's the first thing that people look at when they meet us, as they hear what we say long before they see what we live. But then ultimately they sort of flip-flop, and what you live is more important than what you say. So the people who become most successful in life are those people who master the influence as they progress through life, and they're able to persuade and influence other people and change their thoughts, beliefs, and actions, get them to purchase products and get them to enter into relationships and those kinds of things. And when I say get them, I don't mean in a manipulative type of way, but it means in the process of influence and persuasion. So who needs to improve their communication skills? Well, students need to improve their communication skills. If you're listening to this and you're a student, you need to learn to improve your communication skills with your teachers and the like. Spouses need to improve their communication skills. Anybody who's been married knows that we speak different languages. There was the old book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And sometimes when you're married, you feel like you're talking French and your spouse is talking German. We need to learn to communicate better and to improve our communication skills to influence and persuade. Parents certainly need to improve their communication skills. If you're a person who's listening to this and you have children, you know that the older they get, the more you have to improve your communication skills to be able to influence and persuade them, particularly in those teenage years when kids are finding themselves and you want to still be involved in their lives and that type of thing. You want to master those communication skills to influence and persuade. Bosses need to learn how to influence and persuade the workers who work with them. It's not enough anymore to just simply say, "I'm the boss, that's why, now go do it." We have to learn to communicate in such a way so that our people who work for us want to follow us. They want to be influenced. They want to be persuaded. It's not just something that we dictate to them that you got to do it because we're the boss. Coaches, it's not just sports coaches, but it's life coaches now. It's a big burgeoning career that people have, and a lot of executives have life coaches. Well, coaches need to learn to master their communication skills so that people want to be influenced and persuaded by them. So, what do you get when you master your communication skills? You might be saying, okay, Chris, I've signed off. I believe that I need to master these skills. I want to become an influencer. I want to become a persuasive person. What do I need to do to improve my skills? What is it that I get when I master my communication skills? Well, here's some things that you get. I believe that when you master your communication skills, you'll make more money. And I don't even care what kind of career you are in. You will make more money if you can learn to communicate better. Because when you learn to communicate better, you become more influential. And when you become influential, you become more persuasive. And when you become more persuasive, you become more valuable to the organization. And I believe that you'll get paid more. Now, if you own your own business, if you can sell more, you'll make more money. And the way to sell more is to build your influence and your persuasion skills. I believe that you'll have better relationships when you master your communication skills. Relationships are all about communication. If you can communicate more clearly, more concisely, those are the kinds of things that are going to enable you to go across those chasms that are created in relationships. Every human relationship has ups and downs, and they come to and fro, and they ebb and they flow, and there's times when it's rough. To get through those rough times is the ability to influence and persuade because you have good communication skills. It's imperative to great relationships. And I believe that when you master your communication skills, you're going to have better relationships. I think that if you are a boss or a business owner, you're going to have more effective workers because you're going to be able to persuade them in ways that you wouldn't if you didn't have good communication skills. They're going to like you more. They're going to understand your vision and the mission of the work that they're doing, and you're going to be able to influence them, persuade them, and you're going to be better off. Now, most people, I believe, can drastically improve their influence with just a few simple changes. And this is a principle that I think is true. I've done over 30 audio programs now, and every topic that I talk about really boils down to just a few simple changes. I believe that the vast majority of people can make significant changes in their lives if they'll make just a few simple changes. They can take themselves from A to Z, or at least from A to halfway through the alphabet to M, if they'll just make a few simple changes. See, most people aren't way off of life, but they're just kind of off of life. But if you go far enough and you're kind of off, eventually you become way off. And so the important thing is to make some simple changes, to start to turn that ship around simply and slightly, and eventually you turn your whole life around. So I think that there are some things that you can do to begin to improve your communication skills, and you will become more influential and more persuasive by just changing a few things. Let's talk about them. Let's ask this question. What do you communicate? Not how do you communicate, but what do you communicate? What do you communicate by your physical appearance? When people see you, and they're going to make decisions about you. It's interesting to me. People always say, well, you can't judge a book by its cover. Well, that's probably true, that you don't know what's on the inside by what's on the outside, but the fact is that people judge people all the time. Right or wrong, good or bad, moral, immoral, amoral, it doesn't matter. It's a fact of life that when people see us, they make decisions about us. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to write you off, but they might see you as less persuasive based on some simple things. So by your physical appearance, what do people think of you based on what you're communicating? What about your dress? And I don't mean, wearing a dress. I mean your dress, the way you dress. If you're a man, I certainly hope you're not wearing a dress, right? You want to dress appropriately. When people come and they see you and they say, that person is dressed in a particular way. If you go into a very high-powered business meeting, you want to be dressed for success. If you show up on the farm to go out horse riding with your friends, you don't want to show up in a tuxedo. You're not going to be very influential and carry a lot of weight with your conversation if you show up in a tuxedo. See, we want to dress appropriately to manage first impressions, to manage our physical appearance in such a way that people look at us and we don't cause problems for our influence influence and persuasion, but we bolster our ability to influence and persuade. So some of the best things that you can do to improve your ability to influence and persuade other people by what you communicate, not with your words, but by how you dress. Another might be your weight. When people look at you, what do they think in terms of your ability to influence and persuade? Does it match up? These are important questions to ask. Some people might be too heavy. Some people might be too skinny. And obviously we all come in different sizes and shapes and that type of thing. But if we want to influence and persuade more effectively, then we ought to reconsider how we might live our lives as it relates to our weight. Doesn't certainly mean that you can't influence, but if you want to become more influential, if you want to have more ability to speak into the lives of people, it's important for us to take a look at that. What about your hair? If you're still wearing a hairdo from the 1970s, chances are if you walk into a business meeting and you've got that Farrah Fawcett hairdo, chances are people are going to kind of go, hey, didn't that go out with the 70s? If you're still wearing a beehive, chances are people are going to say, she's kind of stuck in the 50s. You want to make sure that your hair is done well and it's appropriately done. What about your makeup? Sometimes you'll see somebody and you go, oh my goodness, they're wearing way too much makeup. These are all things that we need to ask ourselves. Men, are you shining your shoes? It says something about what you consider to be important. It tells something about the attention to detail. And these are all things that people might not necessarily think about. They might not say, well, he didn't shine his shoes, therefore I'm not going to listen to him. But it's a simple first impression thing that we ought to think about as people see us. What are the first impression things that we give off, and what does that communicate? And yes, it's true. It's a communication skill that will determine your ability to influence and persuade those first impressions that we give off by our physical appearance. You see, we communicate by our first impression, and there's some things that we communicate. We communicate confidence. Do we have confidence? When people meet us, they're gauging whether or not we are self-sufficient. They're gauging whether or not we have confidence. They're gauging whether or not we believe in ourselves and those kinds of things. People are looking at us in our first impression for eye contact. Do we make eye contact? Have you ever met somebody and they just won't make eye contact? They're looking elsewhere. What are you saying when you're not making eye contact? You might be saying, I have no self-confidence. You might be saying, I'm looking for somebody more important because if somebody else comes along, I'm going to ditch this conversation and move on to somebody else. When you're not making eye contact with somebody when you're talking to them, that's a communication skill. To look somebody in the eyes and speak directly to them, that's a skill that's going to breed confidence and trust and likability and all those kinds of things. Another thing that you give off in your first impression is what I just mentioned, likability. Are you a likable person? See, people make decisions really quickly, sometimes within 30 or 40 seconds about whether or not they like you. And if they don't like you, they're not going to listen to you. And if they don't listen to you, you're not going to be able to influence and persuade them. Now, all the things that I've been talking about up to now are some things that you can learn now, but you can also learn over time. One of the resources that we make available to you at www.chriswidener.com is a free newsletter, actually a couple of different free newsletters. And what we do is we send it to you via email, completely free. Each and every week, we give you some different ideas on how to improve your lives and how to become more successful, how to take your career to the next level, how to improve your relationships, all those things. It's a free electronic newsletter, and you can get that at chriswidener.com. I want to encourage you not to just listen to this audio program, but to continue this lifelong pursuit of improving your ability to become a leader, improving your ability to communicate and influence and persuade. So stop on by over the internet, www.chriswidener.com. Here's some keys to improving your communication. Some keys to improving your ability to influence and persuade other people. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is something that I speak about often as I'm out speaking to different groups, is Aristotle's 3 parts of persuasion from his writing, The Rhetoric. Now, when you break it down, you've got 3 different areas. You've got logos, pathos, and ethos. Logos is logic, pathos is passion, and ethos is ethics. These are the 3 parts. If you want to be a persuasive person, you have to have all 3 parts: logic, passion, and ethics. We've already talked about character, and that's the ethical part. It's building that trust. It's having honesty, that type of thing. So we're gonna move on because we've talked about the importance already of your character and your internal fortitude and the way people look at that. But let's talk about the other 2, logos and pathos. Logic, the logos, being logical, being clear, being concise, making sense, being rational, making intellectual sense. When you're trying to persuade somebody, you don't want them to get to the end of your sales pitch and have them go, huh? You want them to be able to understand it. You have to be able to communicate in such a way, in a clear, concise, short manner that they're say, oh, I get it. That's what you want people to come to at the end of your time of trying to persuade and influence. You want them to go, yeah, that makes sense to me. I get it. Now, the other is pathos, and it's passion. And that means you love it. You believe in it. You're demonstrative when you're talking about it. You're speaking with your eyes and your hands. Your tone is right. Your pace is right. You're excited about it. Now, you're not overly passionate about it, but you're excited about it. You're able to talk about it with some passion, and you're excited about it. That comes off to other people, and they get excited about it as well. Now, you don't want to just have excitement with no logic, but you don't want to just have logic with no excitement. These two things, when they come hand in hand, they fit like gloves together. It's perfect when it's based on that foundation of ethics. When people trust you and they understand you, and you give off a sense of passion about what it is that you're talking about. Those three parts, when they're brought together, are the things that influence and persuasion are made of. So when you're thinking about how do I communicate, you ask yourself, first of all, am I living in such a way that people believe me and trust me? Then you say, am I clear, concise? Do I make sense? And then do I love it? Do I believe in it? Am I demonstrative? Do people sense the passion I have for whatever it is I'm talking about? Whether it's something you're selling or something that you're trying to communicate, the vision of your company, or you're trying to communicate with your kids. If you want to influence and persuade, live a life of character, have some logic, make it clear, concise, and be passionate about it. Another thing that you can do to improve your communication and your influence persuasion skills is to improve your vocabulary. There's lots of products, and you're listening to one of them, an audio program that teaches you communication skills and influence and persuasion and that type of thing. Improve your vocabulary. Learn some new words. Now, it's an interesting thing because a lot of times you'll learn a new word and you think, oh, I'm going to use that word. You don't want to use a word that's so big that people think, I don't even know what that word means. Or you don't want to use a word that's so big that they'll say, oh, who's he trying to impress? But there's a lot of great words. And as you expand your vocabulary, you learn to communicate in such a way that gives you an effectiveness. It gives you some panache. It gives you some pizzazz. And people remember what you say and they're moved by what you say. You could say, yeah, that product, there sure is a lot of them. Or you could say, that product is ubiquitous. I love the word ubiquitous. It's a great word, and there's all sorts of words out there that communicate with a little bit of panache and some style and some flair, and it makes people remember what it is that you're trying to communicate to them, trying to influence them about. So another thing that you can do is practice speaking. I meet people all the time, and they say, I'm not a very good speaker. Well, the vast majority of people are afraid of public speaking. You've probably heard that they've done studies and they've found that public speaking is the number one fear. In fact, as it's always stated, that most people would rather die than give a public speech, which is kind of interesting. Public speaking, more people are afraid of public speaking than they are of dying, which means when you go to a funeral, most people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. And that's quite interesting to me. I'd rather give the eulogy all day long, right? So when you are practicing your speaking, when you're out there giving speeches, or even if you're not a professional speaker like I am, you're going to have to give speeches and little training sessions at your work. You might have to speak at the PTA. You want to practice your speaking and get better and better and better. You don't have to be a professional speaker right off the bat. Most people are never going to be professional speakers, but most of us are going to have some sort of income or success that is directly connected to our ability to communicate, our ability to speak. So it would behoove you to improve your ability to communicate with other people. And that just simply means practice your speaking. It means get better at it. It means that you're going to learn to grow and get better. You're going to learn new words. You're going to learn new pacing. You're going to learn to craft your speech in such a way that you don't go on and on and on and on to the point where people's eyes roll back in their head and they say, when is this person ever going to end? Practice your speaking. There's a great group called Toastmasters, which is an excellent opportunity for you in local communities around where you live to practice getting better at speaking. And it's a very simple way for you to show up with some other people who all have as the same goal to learn to communicate in a better way. Another key to improving your communication is to think about your nonverbal communication. Are you communicating when somebody's talking to you or you're talking to somebody else? Are you communicating that you're bored? That you're just totally bored out of your skull? I mean, people get that sense when they're listening to you if you aren't purposefully trying to be engaged. Are you giving off the impression that you're angry? Do you give off the impression that you're condescending? All of these things are nonverbal communication. If your eyes are rolled back and you're looking around, your hands are crossed, your arms are crossed, you're looking bored. And that's not good because people pick up on that and they will not allow you to influence them. They will not engage in a relationship with you if you're coming across as bored, angry, condescending, or the like. The key with your nonverbal communication, that is your posture. That's the way you hold your hands. It's the way you sit. It's the way you look. It's the way you use your eyes. The goal is to become engaged. You want to let the other person know, whether you're speaking to them or listening to them, that you are engaged in the conversation, that this is important to you, that they are important to you, and that you want to influence and persuade them, or you want to let them know that you want them to influence and persuade you. Another key is to what I call listen up. That means to engage. It means to be quiet. It means to hear and to process what other people are saying. One of the biggest things you can do as a communication skill to influence and persuade other people is to listen, is to be quiet and listen. Remember at the very beginning of this audio program, I said that there's a myth that communication is simply the words that we say. In fact, communication oftentimes, especially if you want to influence and persuade other people, is to listen to them. If you have teenagers, you've already heard this. They say, you just don't listen to me. They'll say, you don't listen to me, you don't care, et cetera, et cetera. When somebody's saying that to you and they're saying, you don't listen to me, they are also saying the underlying premise is I'm not going to listen to you either. You have no ability to influence me or persuade me because you don't even listen to me. It's so important that people make their decision about whether you're going to influence them by whether or not you reciprocate and allow them to influence you. If they aren't being heard, you're not going to be heard. Most people aren't really listening, but they're simply waiting for the chance to speak. When somebody else is talking, most people aren't listening and processing and trying to internalize it. Instead, they make a snap decision about what it is that they want to say, and then they're just waiting for somebody to take a breath, albeit very short breath, so they can jump in and throw their own 2 cents in. One of the best things you can do to persuade and influence other people, and it is a communication skill, is to learn how to listen, to be quiet, to listen, to wait for the other person to finish their thought, and then to thoughtfully process it, and then engage back to them what it is that you just heard. Communication is a skill that can be improved. You can improve your communication. You might be listening to this and you might be an extraordinary communicator, but you can get better. In fact, I was working with a person who was running for very high political office, running for governor of his state, and he was a client of mine. I was his speech coach, and when we first began working together, after I heard him 2 or 3 times, I would travel with him about a day a week. Toward the end of the election process, I was with him 2 or 3 days a week, and one of the first things I said to him after I heard him speak 2 or 3 times, I said, you know what your biggest problem is going to be communicating and improving as a speaker? And he said, what? And I said, you're already very good. The fact is that if you're already very good, that can actually be a hindrance to you getting better. But the fact is even if you're already very good, you can get better. And you need to make sure that you say, I can get better. I'm not just going to rely on the fact that I'm already pretty good. Now, most of you are probably in the middle. You're mediocre communicators. Well, you can improve your career, your life, your relationships, everything about your life by taking some simple steps in upgrading your ability to communicate, to influence and persuade, and taking it so that you're a very good communicator. Some of you are out there saying, I'm just a poor communicator. Well, I want to first and foremost applaud you for picking up this audio program and listening to it and taking it seriously and telling you that, you know what, you've recognized it, and that's the first step to becoming a great communicator, is to realize that right now you're a poor communicator, but now you're beginning to get the tools and the learning and the understanding, the education, and then when you begin to apply it and you begin to practice and you begin to grow, you're going to improve your life tremendously simply because you're becoming a better communicator, and you're going to influence more people. You're going to influence the people who you already have influence with to a deeper level, and you're going to open up your sphere of influence to more and more people. And when you do that, you're going to get back to those benefits, more money, better relationships, all those kinds of things, and you're going to enjoy life and feel better about it. The important thing is to be honest about where you are. if you're great, if you're mediocre, or if you're poor. You need to be honest about where you are and then set up a plan for improvement. If you need to learn to speak better, join Toastmasters. Volunteer to give weekly training sessions, something like that. Improve your ability to communicate. If you're a poor writer, go back to school and take a writing class, take a creative writing class, that type of thing. Improve your communication skills to influence and persuade by developing a plan for improvement. And the last bit that I would give you is to practice, 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 practice. You're always going to be able to improve, and the ability to get to be one of the best is to practice, practice, practice. You know, I've been making a living as a professional speaker, speaking many times over and over and over again. Sometimes over the course of the year, I've given up to 150 speeches in 1 year, and I'm always getting better. And even at this stage in my career, I'm saying, you know what, here's a thing that I can change and I can make better and I can improve. Every single one of us, through practice, 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 is going to be able to make it better. There are times that I'll give a speech and I'll say something and I'll think, hey, they thought that was funny. And I've learned, and it was an active practice to me, so that the next time I go out, I will purposely put it in there, and it will make me a better communicator. It will make me more effective at influencing and persuading people. In closing, I'd like to just remind you that your success in life is dependent heavily upon your ability to influence the people around you, whether they're your family or the people you work with or your friends. Oftentimes, our success and our joy and our fulfillment in life, because we live with other people, is determined by the ability to influence other people and persuade them, to help them change their thoughts, beliefs, and actions. You've taken the first step to be able to do that by purchasing this audio program, and I believe that you are just beginning and you're on your way, and you're going to exceed even your biggest dreams, and you're going to excel and do tremendous things.
This book is continued on Disc 11.